All right, have a great show tonight.
Thank you, my friend. Chris Cuomo here. Welcome to News Nation, where right and left come to be reasonable. You know why I'm not in Los Angeles? Because I don't want to be part of the problem. That's why. Here's my argument. LA is about 500 square miles, right? It's humongous. Most of the demonstrations and rioting span a few city blocks in downtown LA. You literally have to look for it. Now, has some of it spilled out into other areas and what's going on the freeway right now? Of course. But the idea of saying, not since 92, this is nothing like 1992. This is nothing like BLM and what we saw during George Floyd in terms of the scale and the penetration of a lot of the issues. So why all the attention? For the most part, opportunism. And look, I get why the drama is happening in Los Angeles, and you're going to see it in Chicago, and now you're going to see it in the nation's capital because of this parade to celebrate the military we're going to have this weekend. The city is almost half Latino. Reportedly, 1 in 3 of those are immigrants, and as many as 1 million in L.A. proper may be illegal entrants. So, of course, ICE operations were going to be controversial, especially when they do as they do. When they come in heavy and hard and their choppers circling in communities and the vehicles and the number of forces dressed like special ops, despite the lawfulness of the operations, they can seem invasive, frightening, and destructive. I get it. And I suspect the administration wanted this confrontation and went there to find it. We don't know how many ICE arrests have taken place in Los Angeles so far, but on Friday, that was like the first day of the ICE raids in L.A. They got like 121 people they say are illegal immigrants, okay? This was before the protests turned into rioting, which complicated the operations, of course. Now, I think the scenes on the streets may matter more to the administration than the actual operations. It's a huge win for them. The idea that you are in the streets fighting people from enforcing the law. We voted on this issue. The majority is in favor of enforcing the laws, specifically to get rid of illegal entrants who pose criminal threats. Now, arguably, is ICE doing more than that? Yes. Are they doing things that could damage communities and people who pay taxes and are living the right way even if they entered the wrong way? Yes. So the idea, though, of people or the local politicians trying to demonize enforcing the law is just a losing cause, and it's a bad look politically. The mayor saying, stop the ICE operations and you'll stop the riots. Really? You really want to send the message that if enough people break the laws in your city, you'll stop enforcing the law? It's a terrible position. So I get what it is and what it isn't, okay? Scattered protests, some bad actors rioting mixed in should not dominate our attention for days. We're being fed false urgency. I was literally just watching a scene of car drives through protests in Chicago, and it was running for like 2 minutes. Seriously? Now, why are they doing it? You know why. This works better for both sides and for the media. And they're going to keep feeding it to you until you stop watching. And what's happening versus what's not happening during this time? Are we debating solutions on what really matters? Are we talking about the economy? Are we dealing with what's happening in the streets and who's terrified? But we're not talking about who's been tariff-fied. That's why misinformation from both sides is all over the place, all over social media. On the right, you got these wild conspiracy theories. Did you know George Soros is sending pallets of bricks? The guy's like 100 years old. Really? The mayor, Karen Bass, is a CIA agent. The riots, deep state. And on the left, fake stories claiming ICE was gearing up to raid an elementary school to kidnap kids at the graduation. That's what is really playing out. The battle of fringe agendas that has dominated our dialogue and now is dominating the streets. Magnified minorities where the few push fringe ideas, and the real problem is they distract from the common concerns of the many. And look, I don't get the move. I get the optics, but, you know, the National Guard, the Marine deployment, it's $134 million they say it's going to cost. Really? Right now, when we're supposed to be cutting with what's happening in these cities, now is the time to have a parade? Look, I'm proud of our military, but I don't really believe that that's what this weekend is going to be about. And I think it could become another circus, and we don't need it. Celebrating the media is great, but is this going to be another distraction from what would really be best for the military in terms of looking at the spending and how to reapportion it and how to cut it? Do we really need another LA? Here's the point. You know what else we voted on and demanded focus and change, and we are not getting it? The economy. The media is forcing us to see terrified people on a few streets when they should be showing you who is terrified. I love that word. I'm taking it from my brother-in-law. He said it today. I told him I'd take it, and I'm taking it. Small businesses are in distress. Jobs are disappearing. The fear is real about that, too. Way more than what's happening on the streets of LA is what's happening all over this country that's not getting the attention. The national debt, that's an 80-20 issue, too, meaning the overwhelming majority of us are in favor of it, just like enforcing the law with immigration. That is the chaos that deserves attention, not Los Angeles. Because while we focus on clicking on the chaos, Congress is getting closer to passing a tax and budget bill, despite the CBO saying it adds trillions of dollars to the national debt. And that this tax bill will once again help the top disproportionately and even cost working families money. Now, the pushback to that is the tariff revenue will pay for the cuts. Maybe. I saw what the CBO said, but it was laden with ifs. If the tariffs stay in place over a decade and at fixed high levels. Reminder, they have already been reduced and removed many times. Why would we believe that those kinds of ifs will hold? We're told hundreds of billions were coming in from the tariffs. So far, it turns out the actual number is like 70 billion. And you have to ask, who's paying that? Well, the countries absorb it. No, not really. No. The people who are absorbing it are the same people who are going to get the least from the tax cuts. The working families that need the most help. So where are the Democrats calling that out and giving better answers? If people are going to get thrown off Medicaid, what should change? If Social Security needs to change, what should change? Where are the ideas? If this is what the tax bill is going to be, what would be better? The cost of products, shoes, home tools, kitchen stuff, apparel, Nintendos. It's all going up because of the price pressure from tariffs. It may pay off. There may be deals, but not right now. And right now matters. So you want to focus on the problems on Main Street, forget about the demonstrators, and see what the economy is demonstrating. A recent survey by the Institute of Supply Management found that the tariffs are pushing factories to cut 8,000 jobs last month. Why? Orders and output fell. Well, I didn't hear that. I know, of course not. Not over the cacophony of what's happening in Los Angeles. Instead of making arguments about Trump, the Democrats need to make arguments for solutions. This is the opportunity and the time. Get back in the business of better. Sell a vision for hope instead of just hoping that Trump fails enough to swing the pendulum back to you. We have to focus on what affects the many and not Los Angeles, not all the time, no matter how often they shut down a freeway. We all talked about gas prices, and then what happened? We got distracted. Remember what the answer was during the campaign? Drill, baby, drill. Have you seen the latest reports? Did you know that oil production in the U.S., by the people who measure it, is said to have peaked? So we can't drill our way out of it. There is no extra capacity. We are putting out the most in the world. Did you know that? I know. You would think, no, we don't put out any. That's the whole answer. It's not the answer. We're at almost max capacity. They believe that production will be lower next year than it was this year. Why? Well, you're at capacity, and now there's an added strain. What is it? The tariffs. Weighed down energy demand. OPEC has increased the global oil supply. Last point. If you want to focus on why this matters, what we're seeing in Los Angeles, I'm not saying that there's nothing to it. Obviously there is, and I hope it doesn't get worse. But I'll tell you, we got to focus on what really matters the most, not just what is a spectacle in the moment and what moves the needle about which side is worse in this battle to the bottom of this two-party poison. What I see on those streets is an alliance of various groups many of whom really don't give a damn about ICE. But each and all of them have a very specific goal: to destroy what we are, our democracy, our institutions, our culture, to bring down the West. That is what unifies the anarchists, the far-left radicals, the far-right neo-nationalists, the Islamists who are carrying flags there in the front with all these white people behind them. The desire to burn it down. That is why I worry about fundamentalism here at home. That is what you are seeing. Anyone saying that these protests are mostly peaceful or ignoring that fundamentalists are standing front and center in the riots. Look, here's what I'm saying. I know I'm talking about it. I know I'm showing it, but I'm not there for a reason. And I believe it is a distraction and that we need to focus on what matters. And while it plays out, let's keep talking about what it's going to mean to the overall dialogue, all right? So, who are the main players? Okay, obviously, we know what the administration is doing, but this is about the governor and mayor in California. And they're making an interesting play here, which is to basically say Trump is the problem. It's about ICE. It's about what he's doing with the military. So I wanted to bring in two people to kind of debate the state of play and see what our chances to go from right or left to get to the only direction that matters, which is forward. Progressive YouTube host Brian Tyler Cohen, former New Hampshire governor, Chris Sununu, both friends of show. Brian, good for you on talking to the people who matter in the moment. You talked to the AG, you talked to the governor. Here's a taste for people.
He knowingly went in a reckless way, did something that's almost without precedent in our lifetime. Unconstitutional, illegal, immoral. This is Trump's mess. He created it. He knew full well what would happen if he did this. He offered no support, no counsel, no advice, no other consideration. He just acted in an immature manner in order to create the kind of problems that people are now witnessing on the streets.
What's the plus side of that argument, do you believe, for the governor within the ranks of the Democratic Party?
Well, politically speaking, for Newsom, I mean, this gives him a platform from which he could, call out Donald Trump for the blatant scheme that he's running right now, which is, look, he's had a really bad month as it relates to the fallout with Elon Musk, as it relates to the precarious path forward for his budget bill, the fact that 14 million people are going to lose access to their health care, people are going to lose access to food assistance to the tune of $300 billion. This thing is going to blow up the deficit at the hands of these so-called deficit hawks. And so clearly, Donald Trump was looking for a distraction, as you laid out in the opening block of this show. And so that's what he's doing. And Newsom being able to very clearly call that out for what it is, and what he's willing to sacrifice, what Donald Trump is willing to sacrifice, I think is a good moment for him to at least politically speaking, to show that he is willing to meet this moment with the urgency that it deserves.
All right, so let's take that last phrase, Gov. Meet this moment with the urgency it deserves. I get what Brian's talking about, but that's not what we're living in Los Angeles. The moment is the governor and the mayor not having control of their own city. Trump wouldn't have had an opportunity to federalize the National Guard if they had been controlling the situation. And the issue behind it is one of the ones that hurt the Democrats the most. These people are essentially protesting enforcing the law.
That's absolutely right. And again, the governor had all the opportunity in the world to control the situation, didn't do it. Trump called him on Saturday, had a 15-minute phone call where he said, get a handle on this thing. And let's remember, this is Los Angeles and California. Have they ever handled a riot or disruption in the streets well? No. And Trump was there in 2020. We saw the cities burn. We saw billions of dollars of damage. We saw people across the country get killed. And Trump said, get a hold of it on Saturday. Nothing happened. So Trump said, OK, if you're not going to actually bring in the National Guard, I have the ability to do it. We're not going to let this thing get out of control. So Gavin has missed a huge opportunity here because he could have been part of the solution, chose to just be like, yeah, we have crisis in our streets, but it must be Trump's fault. And he's playing into this, to your earlier point, the political card of where he's just kind of doing that woke thing of, in the name of social justice, it's okay to not get control of the situation. It would be fine if we just let it play out. It's never fine if you let it play out. And so, I think there's other governors in the wings that probably want to run for president as well. Wes Moore and Josh Shapiro and Gretchen Whitmer going, boy, if this guy in California is the mouthpiece for the Democratic Party, he's driving us into a real problem. And they're going to probably capitalize that shortly after the midterms.
Brian, I see you shaking your head. Of course you come in. That's why I want you on the show. But I will say this. Legally, I don't know about this move. And, you know, there is a clip out there of Trump recognizing that you shouldn't be sending in the National Guard if a governor isn't asking unless they're very extreme circumstances. I see a political play in this for Trump, and it's a dicey one. But the issue, Brian, why aren't the Democrats doing what you do so well on your platform? Here's what I think that should happen with Medicaid. Here's what the problem is with the tax bill. Here's what the problem is with the tariffs, and this would have been better. That's not happening, and instead it's Trump is a despot. You really believe that gets you to a better place, or should they be more like you?
Well, it's not. You can walk and chew gum at the same time. We can both talk about, and we should talk about, the fact that Donald Trump is trying to strip health care away from 14 million Americans and strip food assistance away to the tune of $300 billion and explode the deficit at the hands of, again, these deficit hawks. But we also have to talk about the fact that he's blatantly attempting this government overreach, this big government overreach, again, at the hands of the purported small government party. But two things here that I want to respond to Governor Sununu. The first is that the LAPD itself, which is by no means some liberal organization. This isn't some like crunchy tree-hugging organization here. They themselves have come out and said that they had this under control. And the second point that I wanted to make is...
Well, the chief said last night, Brian, that his guys were
overwhelmed.
Yeah.
They're overwhelmed.
So there are different narratives there. But keep going, Brian.
The second point is it wouldn't matter what was happening. Donald Trump was looking for any pretense to be able to do what he's doing because he needs to change the narrative. Do you really expect anybody to believe that even if there was minimal, like the smallest amount of protest possible, that Donald Trump still wouldn't be looking for a way, some thin pretense to be able to send in the National Guard? Already there wasn't, well, at least initially when they had spoken about this, the LAPD said that they had it under control. And so clearly this was engineered by Donald Trump to figure out a way to get us to stop talking about the Elon fallout, to get us to stop talking about this budget bill, and to figure out a way to talk about something that he views as more politically advantageous.
Yeah, look, so let's wrap them both out. Gov, I'll give you the last word.
Trump watched these cities burn in 2020. He watched blue state governors do absolutely nothing. He watched everyone sit on their hands, and he said, we're not going to have it. And he's sending a message to Chicago, New York, and the rest of the country, hey, you all better get a hold of this, or we're going to step in, because he's not going to sit there and see a repeat of 2020 again. If California had some record of handling this well, that would be one thing. But Gavin Newsom is a complete disaster. Mayor Bass is a disaster on this stuff. They have no record of success in handling any of this very well. So, I think it's the right thing to do, and he's sending a message to the rest of the country. Get a hold of it before we come in and do it for you.
Look, it's a dicey proposition having the Marines on the ground. I love those men and women. I respect them. I don't like the position they're being put in right now. I hope nothing happens with this. My point is this. I got to jump. We should be fighting about what is in this budget bill and whether the tariffs are going to work and they're not and what would be working better. You know what I mean? If you want to get into a fight about who's worse and we don't need to do it the way it's happening in Los Angeles right now because we're ignoring a much better opportunity. Now, I'll tell you guys this. Brian Tyler Cohen is definitely having the right conversations on his platform. That's why I chase after him to get him on the show. And I appreciate you making the case here, brother. You're always welcome. And, Governor, thank you for balancing it out with perspective from the other side. Thank you both. To be continued. Thank you, Phil.
Thanks, Chris.
4 minutes and 35 seconds. So, look, the right path for Newsom, for California, is to question the legality of what the president's doing. That matters, okay? It does. So a judge was asked and denied the governor's request for a TRO, okay? A hearing was scheduled for Thursday. Why? Because the governor didn't want the government to have a chance to respond. That was never going to happen. So, is this about the law? Is there a legal argument? All right? I have one of the president's former attorneys to weigh in. And also, you know what else he's an expert in? RICO. I keep getting beat up by saying I don't feel that the Diddy case has been made. So let's bring in an expert who can also beat me around and tell me I don't know and I wasted my money on that law school. So, Governor Gavin Newsom is right to challenge the legality of bringing in the National Guard on the federalized manner and the Marines, if that happens. But the first judge he went to said, no, you're not getting a TRO. Why? Because the request was, let's not have any arguments for the government, just give me the TRO. And the judge said, no, you got to have a scheduled hearing. It's going to be Thursday. You got to let both sides make their case. So what will happen next legally? I want to ask one of President Trump's former attorneys, James Trusty. He's joining me right now. Jim, thanks very much for joining me, as always. I believe there is a case to be made that this does not check the box of when a president can federalize the National Guard. But the governor saying don't let the government make its case was an ill-fated move to begin with.
Yeah, I mean, look, a lot of these emergency hearings create problems creating a factual record. The judge is like, what am I supposed to believe? How am I supposed to know, what each side really has to support their positions? And Judge Breyer, the brother of Justice Breyer from the Supreme Court formerly, basically said, time out, let's give it a couple of days. But I have to say, Chris, I think that it's going to be tough sledding for California. Their motion acknowledges that you can use National Guardsmen and presumably Marines in a support role. In other words, they can't be out there doing searches, arrests, seizures, frontline for the protests. That creates a Posse Comitatus Act problem, a long historical prohibition against using military as cops. But the 10th Article 10 or Title 10 of the U.S. Code specifically says there are circumstances, even when a governor says no to mobilizing his National Guard, that the U.S. president can do so. And protecting federal property is the hook here. You had protests that weren't just literally on the streets of L.A., but at an ICE headquarters, at an ICE detention facility. There's your justification. And again, I don't know where Judge Breyer will go with it, but I actually think if it goes to the Ninth Circuit, which is the next stop on this if it's being litigated, I think there's a real good chance that the administration is going to win on that because it fits within Title 10. Not used a whole lot, but it's something that can be used, and there's presidential authority for
Here's
it.
the flip. I'm with you, as long as they're just standing in front of a building. But, you had the president say during a campaign, a president should not call in the National Guard if the governor isn't asking. Why? Because it's not a good look. That's why. And he acknowledged that himself. And the idea of saying they spit, we hit, just because it rhymes doesn't make it legally saleable in terms of color of authority. Do you think that comes in and has an effect on the case?
I don't think it really has an effect on the case. There may be some effort to drag it in. I mean, look, politicians and media folks like to use buzzwords and buzz phrases, like maybe terrified, for instance.
That was a good one.
So,
come on,
yeah,
Jim, come on. That's not mine, but I'm happy to steal it.
It was a good one. But look, I don't see that as really creating a serious part of the factual record. This is a straight issue of Title 10 and Posse Comitatus. What are the parameters of authority for the president? I think he comes out on top eventually.
All right, now help me with something else. RICO. I keep having all of these better minds on, and they're like, wow, the predicate acts were here, and this one, and that one, and this and that. And they're going to get Diddy because of this and that, and the Mann Act alone, and then the weapons. But in my gut, I get it. I went to law school. I'm no Jim Trusty, but, I practiced a little bit. I feel like the jury has to believe that the facts are suggestive beyond a reasonable doubt that this guy was running an enterprise that was about the predicate acts that are defined by the prosecution. And to me, it doesn't feel like that. It feels like they're just cataloging a list of real scummy things this guy did.
Yeah, look, those are good observations. I hate to give you credit, but I will. I mean, look, I was the head of the organized crime and gang section for DOJ, so I tried about 4 or 5 RICO trials myself, usually MS-13, not entertainers. And then I supervised, hundreds or dozens of them and approved hundreds. So I've lived RICO for a long time, particularly when I was a prosecutor. And what's unusual here is a couple of things. You've got a single defendant enterprise, and that's rare to start with. It's legally permissible, but it's unusual to say our enterprise here, the magic phrase for racketeering crimes is it a criminal enterprise? And here it's Sean Combs and all of his business incarnations forming the enterprise. So that's a little different. That's going to be a little tricky for instructions. But what I think you're going to see is right now you've been hearing about these assaults, right? Sexual assaults, physical assaults, videotapes, etc. Those are little building blocks, but they have to be built up into something a little bigger for RICO, which is human trafficking or sex trafficking, or you mentioned the Mann Act. Once you have those violations, then you add the layer of this kind of criminal enterprise. So frankly, there's a long way to go. I mean, it doesn't mean they won't pull it together, but they've been focusing on kind of the female victims, the stories that come out of that. Assault and sexual assault are just not predicate crimes to establish the RICO. But if they build into the trafficking offenses, then you've got something to play with.
You know, and this is happening in an environment, an atmosphere, where people are worried that prosecutions have been politicized, that they want to get you. And it's like the old Russian adage, you show me the man, I'll find you the crime. So we'll see how it plays out. But I appreciate the perspective, especially given your pedigree. Jim Trusty, thank you.
Sure, good to see you, Chris.
4 minutes and 30 seconds. Coming up, HHS Secretary Bobby Kennedy. Look, he's going to make changes. He's going to own the operation because now it's his. But he ruffled feathers on the right and left yesterday by saying, I'm firing all 17 members of the CDC's Advisory Committee on Immunizations. Kennedy says this isn't about replacing them with anti-vaxxers, but he's removing members who have conflicts of interest with big pharma. Is that what it's really about? I got the former head of the CDC, and I have one of the members who's being thrown out, who says there's something else going on. Both takes next. Bobby Kennedy announced that all 17 members of the CDC's Advisory Committee for Immunization Practices are out because of conflicts with Big Pharma. He added that 14 of the 17 had rushed appointments in the last year of the Biden administration, kind of like it was like a court-packing scheme. Critics now question whether Kennedy is doing this to fill the panel with anti-vaxxers. Here's what the secretary said today.
So the people who were in charge of that are now gone. And we're going to bring people onto the ACIP panel, not anti-vaxxers. We're bringing people on who are credentialed scientists, who are highly credentialed physicians, who are going to do evidence-based medicine, who are going to be objective, and who are going to follow the science and make critical public health determinations for our children based upon the best science.
Now, look, that sounds fine, but let's be honest. Bobby Kennedy Jr. has a past that has smears on it when it comes to following the science and respecting science. That's why there's skepticism. So let's bring in one of the 17 panelists who was let go, Dr. Noel Brewer. Doc, thank you for joining me. What do you think this is about? What's your concern?
My concern is that we've taken 60 years of efforts to build trust among healthcare providers in the recommendations of the advisory committee through CDC, and that trust just evaporated overnight. It's going to be hard to get that back. Whatever this new ACIP panel is, I look forward to it, and I certainly hope that they can quickly regain that trust. It's necessary for physicians and other healthcare providers to do their work.
Well, if you look forward to what it's going to be, how do you know that it necessarily loses the trust?
It's gone. It's not there anymore. The American Academy of Pediatrics is no longer following CDC guidelines. The move by the Department of Health and Human Services to identify a new set of criteria for COVID-19 vaccination has meant that it's no longer coordinating with any of the professional societies, and all of that was harmonized before. So in multiple ways, there's been a rift that's been going on for a few months now, and this new move has evaporated all trust. So they're going to have to work quickly to rebuild that.
So Bobby's dealing with another type of trust, which is people who don't trust the vaccine and say, hey, it's not a vaccine, it's a therapeutic, and that you guys, not you, but that, you people, right, in quotes, knew that it was going to make people sick, that it wasn't working on the later variants, and you didn't talk about it, and you kept going with it. So that's the trust that he's working on.
I hear you, Chris, but let me ask you this question. If I ran into you at a bar last night having a beer, and I asked you, what do you know about this ACIP committee? And you'd be, I don't know. I mean, well, maybe you do know a little bit about it, but it's pretty arcane. I don't think most Americans even care that much about it. And now that there's all this news and people like me out from our ivory towers, It's generating interest, but I don't think that the impact here is going to be primarily among the general public. Among a core group of vaccine skeptical folks, it will certainly resonate and maybe have some meaning, and maybe there are additional actions. But right now, the main group that's being harmed are healthcare providers who no longer have an authoritative source to look to.
Doctor, I appreciate your perspective. Thank you very much, Dr. Noel Brewer. If you learn things going forward that you think matter in terms of understanding what this is about, we're a call away. Thanks, Doc. All right, let's bring in the CDC, the man who ran the CDC under Trump's first administration, Dr. Bob Redfield. It's good to see you, Doc. Do you think this is ill-advised or well-advised?
You know, Chris, I think to get at the issue is trust, public trust, not trust of academic organizations or different, societies. It's about the public. And we've really lost trust in the public about the power of vaccines. You know, I believe vaccines are the most important gift of science to modern medicine. When I was CDC director, I was very disturbed that over half of the population didn't get the flu vaccine. And so I started a campaign rather than vaccine hesitancy for vaccination with confidence. Well, then the COVID pandemic came. And I have to say, although I have a lot of respect for Noel and the other people on the committee, the reality is the guidance that came out of the ACIP for COVID vaccines, I think in general was ill-advised. There was never any scientific basis for this vaccine to be prioritized for children, right? That this vaccine does not prevent infection. The statement that get vaccinated so that when you go visit grandma, you won't get grandma infected. There's no scientific basis for that statement. And as a consequence, and maybe you can comment on this, I think a lot of the public lost trust in our vaccine policies. And I think what Secretary Kennedy is trying to do is to go on a path to rebuild trust. As you noted, 13 of the 17 members of this committee were appointed in 2024. There was another one that was extended. So 14 of the members, and they have a 4-year term. So nobody would be changed until 2028. I think Kennedy decided that he's worried about conflicts, he's worried about corporate capture, and he's worried about the reality. But this committee recommended the COVID vaccine for children over the age of 6 months, almost unanimously. He wants to get new blood in the committee and have more, debate, more controversy. You and I know it doesn't help to have a committee where you get a vote 17-0. You need to have more disagreement, more debate. And I think, that's what Kennedy's doing. I have 100% confidence in Kennedy. I don't think he's doing this because of any anti-vaccine. I think he's doing it for vaccine transparency. Well, and I think it's a consequence of the mistakes that were made in the previous ACIP in recommending this vaccine where it didn't belong.
Well, let's see who he puts on it, right? The proof will be in the positioning. So we'll see who he puts on it and what they're about, and then we'll circle back and discuss it. Doc, always a pleasure. Thank you for your perspective.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, God bless you. Yeah,
all right, be well, Bob. 4 minutes and 15 seconds. Coming up, Trump's Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard. I've had her on the show. I've had her on the Chris Cuomo Project, my podcast. She just issued a really scary warning, another thing that's getting lost in the fog of L.A. A single nuclear bomb can kill millions in minutes. She says elite politicians and warmongers are pushing us closer to nuclear war. So this I'm using as a peg to bring in a buddy of mine who made a documentary called 67 Bombs to Enid. And it shows how ignoring the past could lead us into a very dangerous future when it comes to atomic threat. All right? We're going to show you the scary truth of what just nuclear testing has done to generations of us. Next. Trump's Director of National Intelligence is Tulsi Gabbard. She just issued a pretty frightening warning. Take a look.
A single nuclear weapon today could kill millions in just minutes. Just one of these nuclear bombs would vaporize everything at its core. People, buildings, life itself. This is the reality of what's at stake, what we are facing now. Because as we stand here today, closer to the brink of nuclear annihilation than ever before. Political elite and warmongers are carelessly fomenting fear and tensions between nuclear powers.
I mean, highly produced, wasn't cheap to make. It's your money. So what is this? Is this propaganda, or do we have something that we should be worried about that she should be putting into a lot more specific tones than just a little movie trailer, all right? And it took me to the issue of what do we know about nukes and how they're practiced, okay? Nuclear testing is something we never talk about, and it can be fatal, not just for people right now, but it can have lasting damage. So a buddy of mine happens to be doing a documentary about this. 67 bombs to Enid. Enid is a place that has experienced this and now is having generational effects. Tracks victims of nuclear testing in the Marshall Islands in the decade after World War II. Here's a clip.
I saw that testing, very, very bright thing. I thought it was some kind of lightning, but it's more than that. And after that testing, it's actually changed the life of the people.
Co-director of the doc is Kevin Ford, my friend, and he joins me right now. It's good to see you, Kev.
It's great to see you, man.
So Tulsi Gabbard gave us a peg for this. And what do you make of her warning, and how does it connect to the message of your film for people?
I agree with the warning. I think that it's one of the greatest existential threats we're facing right now on our planet is nuclear weapons, and the use of them or the misuse of them, the mishandling, accidents are just as dangerous as the intentional use. And as we saw, as you pointed out, in the Marshall Islands, from 1946 to 1958, the United States detonated 67 bombs in these islands just to see what would happen. The results were devastating, and the radiation continues to this day. Generations of people since then are still dealing with incredibly high levels of radiation, diabetes, heart disease, and it's caused a lot of sickness. And one of our reasons we wanted to make the documentary was to get out of the politics of it, to show the human face of what happens when these weapons are used. It's not conventional warfare. It's something far more perverse. We're talking mutations in babies that are being born now who are still from the islands. And our film chronicles people who came from the islands and are now living in the prairie in Oklahoma. And these effects have followed all the way into their new life. And we're hoping that the film at least makes people aware of that.
What surprised you in the making of this film that took it in a different direction?
Well, along with my partners, Brandon Cobes and Ty McMahon, who formed relationships in the town of Enid well before I was even on the film, we found that the Marshallese people had such an incredible, resilient spirit, a spirit of love, pride in their culture. And despite having lived through this nuclear trauma, as you can see in these images, they are people that are proud of who they are, of what they are, and they are fighting to keep their culture alive. And that was something that was surprising to me. It was not a tone of animosity and bitterness, but of progressive moving forward. What do we do with the trauma, and how do we convert it and to hold on to our heritage, but also formulate a new life?
And there's a respect for their legacy in the current context with you making this film now, because this weekend, the administration here in America is entering into the next round of talks with Iran. And of course, the focus is nukes and not letting a despotic, theocratic regime like what's operating in Iran right now get access to something like this. But the process of testing is also going to be on the table again. And this will be a reminder of what that means, even at the minimum.
Absolutely. And it's important to remember, as recently as May 21st, the United States just launched a long-range missile capable of carrying a warhead from California, from Vandenberg, to the Marshall Islands. So it's still going on. I mean, this is very real, and you're absolutely right. It is not being talked about. And I'm not sure why that is, because it's something that will affect all of us on either side and across all geographical lines. The use of nuclear weapons anywhere affects everyone everywhere.
Well said, my friend. I'm not surprised that you're making this film. You are in the business of putting passion to purpose. The film is 67 Bombs to Enid. You want to learn more, I'm sure. Go to Kevin's Instagram page at 67 Bombs to Enid, and there'll be more information there. The film is going to be at the Dead Center Film Festival in Oklahoma, June 12, but there's going to be a lot more reach than that. Go to Instagram and you can find out, because we'll be living the legacy together. Kev, God bless. It's good to see you, brother. Be well.
Hey, I appreciate it, man. Thank you.
Of course. We'll be right back. And my point about what to focus on. You see on the screen, they're going to enact a curfew for parts of downtown. Great. They should have done it days ago. This has not been well managed. Now, you have to ask yourself, is that because they like the optics of it politically there? You know, do they want this fight with Trump? Maybe, but it's not one they win. And it's one that distracts from something that matters more. You know, we're litigating whether or not he should have brought the National Guard there, fine. But we're not talking about the fact that a judge just said the tariffs can stay in place for the pendency of the case overall about whether or not the tariffs were legal in the first place. And that is a real issue, by the way. A president doesn't have inherent tariff power. It is given by Congress, and it was for emergencies. Is this an emergency? That's worth litigating. But they're in effect. And the word tarified should become part of common parlance as long as people are feeling the effects. Small businesses don't get the platform. They don't get the voice, even though they are the engine of our economy. But they don't have the pull in D.C. Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our News Nation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.